Welcome to today's webinar on how to debug your development process with Pluralsight Flow. My name is Austin Bagley. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager over Pluralsight Flow. Pluralsight announced the acquisition of GitPrime this year. We've renamed that product as Pluralsight Flow as of this last August. That change will actually be official next year, so you probably hear us refer to both Flow and GitPrime, but they're the same thing. We're excited to talk about it with you today. I'm joined by TJ McNichols, Enterprise Account Executive for PS Flow in Europe. TJ will introduce himself, but before we begin, wanted to point out that you should see a question mark icon on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to send in questions throughout the webinar. We have roughly a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll spend a few minutes answering questions after that. So with that, I will hand it over to TJ.
Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is TJ McNichols. I'm currently an Enterprise Account Executive for Pluralsight, responsible for the European territory. My previous role at GitPrime, joining 2 years ago, was to stand up the post-sales organization responsible for the account management, account renewal and upsell functions, as well as the onboarding, training, and support functions. My role was responsible for not only selling the product, but also the adoption of the product as well. And over time, I've kind of created a lot of the collateral, some of which you'll see today. And I'm very excited to be rolling out Flow broader into the Pluralsight organization. I'm sure it's going to be a vehicle for success for many of you in 2020. What I'm going to show you now is our typical demo deck, what we call it. It takes about 20 minutes to go through. The meeting is typically a 30-minute demo meeting, 5 minutes for intros, 5 minutes for next steps at the end, and then what I'll walk you through the following 20 minutes to position GitPrime and then kind of dive into the specifics. One thing to call out before we begin: the presentation is designed to not be overly salesy. Our target buyer, as you probably know by now, is engineer, leadership, VP, director, maybe CTO, very technical people, very matter of fact, and very, very busy. So we try to be respectful of that. They also don't typically like salespeople or like slide decks. So we like to not sugarcoat things. They're very technical. We like to speak in a technical way that they can understand and process very quickly, so that at the end of the meeting they can determine whether or not this is interesting enough to move forward, and then they can run to their next meeting. So that's kind of the broader design that you'll see throughout this presentation. With that said, why don't we begin? So, as you know by now, the goal behind GitPrime here is to introduce a data-driven approach to software engineering leadership. And in doing so, it's important to call out that it needs to be the right type of data, that it needs to be the right set of metrics that resonate not only with the teams themselves, but correlate out to measurable business value. So we include the obligatory sales logo board here, but it's important to do so to call out that we truly are the market leader. Flow was first to market and is continued to be the thought leader in the space. You see things like PayPal. This is a full enterprise-wide, full TAM license, tens of thousands of historical users, tens of thousands of code repositories hosted on their own internal version of Flow. Cigna, 75,000 employees. The company is literally hundreds of years old, but they're going through a cloud transformation at scale and rely on GitPrime for the visibility that we provide. When we talk about visibility, really it boils down to this. You think historically how software engineering organizations are evaluated, and it boils down to what did we ship and did it ship on time? Of course, because it's the only two things the business can see, it's the only two things the business cares about. Flow begs the question, what about everything else? Everything else happening below the surface that you all know to be absolutely crucial to delivering on those items on top. By creating visibility into these team workflows, the product enables the organization to do primarily two things. One, identify and remove impediments for the team. Being able to identify when the team is stuck, what's blocking them, having that visibility so we can reduce unnecessary interruptions, system downtimes, and meetings, all to the benefit of the team so they can focus more of their time on the things that they care most about. Number two is to then advocate for engineering, to interface with stakeholders, especially non-technical stakeholders, being able to correlate effort done in engineering to measurable business value or value delivered to the customer. This is more on the manager or executive view, being able to have a rich view of KPI and visibility across the organization, just to have that understanding of what's occurring, when, where, and by whom, and then to be able to communicate that more broadly out into the business. So now that we've set the stage, why don't we take a look at what GitPrime actually is. GitPrime enables fact-based conversations. Here's our three primary roles. By the way, during this call, we're typically speaking with executives. But we also have use cases in the product for managers and for engineers. Engineers enabling to create visibility for their work, to own it, to highlight it, to be able to show that to their bosses. For managers, again, to be able to help the team, and then again for executives to be able to go into the C-suite and advocate for budget or to prioritize projects. So what we're looking at here, we'll go through 5 slides. Typically at the end of this one, I'll pause for questions and initial feedback because we've thrown a lot of information out there. But what we're looking at is kind of the executive use case in this slide. Coding and review metrics, but kind of on this global view, a cross-repository view. Here in the upper left, you're able to answer easy but difficult questions like, are we making progress? Are we trending towards the project goal? Did the change we implement, is it having the desired effect? This is very, very difficult to answer for companies at scale, for companies that have grown by acquisition, for companies that are spread out geographically. One of the beautiful things about GitPrime is being able to compile all of these different sources, and we'll talk about it at the end, into these simple combined dashboards for the entire organization. Bottom left, we typically spend a little bit more time talking about the specifics here because this is interesting, especially to technical people. Our ability to segment out the type of work that is delivered. So what we're looking at is the type of code that's being delivered. Here in green is new work, brand new code that does not update or edit any existing code. Here in orange is legacy refactor, aka paying down technical debt. That's one thing that your executive prospect will be familiar with. It's one of those industry buzzwords, but it's actually very difficult to put meaning behind that. Well, what does that actually mean? When is it occurring? Where? By whom? At what frequency? Enabling leaders to be able to speak to that in an objective way using data becomes really, really empowering. Lastly, helping others in churn. These are modifications to recent code as defined by less than 3 weeks old. We're talking about not only collaboration, but then rewrites to people's own work. This is required. This is healthy, a part of software development, but we just want to make sure that it's in line with the necessary forward progress, or that it's not spiking against the team's average. Many times that's an indication that the team or individual is stuck, or it's unclear specs from product, or scope creep from product. These are terms we'll become familiar with, but terms that our prospect buyer is quite familiar with. Lastly, in the bottom right, a 30,000-foot view into the code review and collaboration patterns. This is the pull request. What we're showing you, for example, is time and hours from when a pull request is open to when it's eventually merged or closed, time to resolve. Time to first comment, time and hours from when that pull request is open to when it's eventually picked up for review by the team. Being able to highlight costly wait states, or when we're forcing the individuals or teams into task switching, which again is not a healthy pattern and has negative impacts to the individuals, to the engineers. You're able to sort again by team, by product, by repo. You can group repos together to represent certain product and features. We have a nested teams functionality, so you can create a parent-child relationship to view the org however you see fit, and then over time benchmark, set targets to normalize this behavior across the organization. The beautiful thing here is that this lends itself to predictability, which is paramount to executives. An executive viewing this demo, I would tell them, you get to now over time have more predictable behavior, which going into the C-suite during budget planning or project planning sessions is invaluable. Changing gears, what we're looking at now is more operational data for team managers, team leads, scrum masters. What we call kind of the morning cup of coffee report over here on the left is our work log. This is where we're bringing in the three primary functions of engineering: code commits, merge commits, when pull requests are being opened and closed, when those PRs are being commented on, and then ticket activity. Again, as a manager, I'm getting a visualization for my team and the dynamics, the interactions between them and the different work types. Again, where, when, whom, at what frequency. Advanced use cases lends itself to determining best practices around coding behavior. You see here on Thursday the 4th, Amrita has one very large code commit. The size of these icons are roughly bucketed, small, medium, large by the size of the activity, whereas Chris on the previous day has many small, frequent commits. Many of our customers have come to the conclusion that Chris has the more desirable commit behavior. By breaking his work into smaller bites, he's encouraging forward progress for himself. He's also creating visibility for his work, not only for the team, but for the manager. He's also getting the code off of the local machine in case of a hard drive crash. A good reminder to be always pushing to server. We're making for a faster and efficient pull request process. Let's make it easier for our peers to review our work as opposed to larger chunks. And then lastly, being able to identify and roll back bugs out of production. Let's cherry pick the 20 lines where the bug exists as opposed to rolling back a significant portion of the project. What we're talking about here is normalizing coding behavior at scale. We don't want 200 engineers fundamentally doing the same job 200 different ways. This enables those leaders, or in self-managed agile scrum environments, for the teams to determine what the best practice is, but then allow those leaders and scrum masters and managers to see to that practice coming to fruition throughout the organization. Upper right, dynamics, individuals relative to the team, and then again their own work focus. Again, in relative to the team, some individuals may be churning higher or lower than the team average. Maybe that's okay, but if that's not in line with the expectations, again, a great opportunity that someone may be stuck and might be needing help. Our third use case here is the daily measurement across the release cycle. Many technical organizations follow a traditional agile methodology that follows a two-week sprint period. So what you're looking at is a 2-week interval here, and being able to see the daily commit behavior across that span. Being able to correlate this out to the specific projects and assignments, being able to ensure that churn and legacy refactor is what you expect it to be given the type of the assignments that teams are working on, and again, that we're progressing towards our goal. Fourth is the code review and pull request analysis. The GitPrime product is the GitPrime Flow, pardon me. The Flow product is made up of 3 primary modules, one of which is entirely focused on the pull request, the code review and collaboration aspects of engineering. This is where engineers spend a large percentage of their time, and really it's the primary reason for the success of platforms like GitHub and Bitbucket and GitLab. It introduces the social aspects and collaboration aspects of engineering. So meaningful visibility into these workflows have a profound impact for business leaders. Here in the upper left, you saw these KPIs earlier in the executive view. Changing the use case here a little bit, you're actually able to drill into the histogram to see the associated pull requests. A lot of customers will use this during their sprint retrospective meetings, again, following that agile practice. Time to resolve, you'll be able to sit with the team in the room and look over all of our commitments and deliverables for the past 2 weeks and say, our median time to resolve was 0.9 hours. That's fantastic, but let's take a look at these pull requests that took more than 36 hours. GitPrime Flow enables you to drill into those actual pull requests, and again, turning buzzwords like continuous improvement or inspect and adapt into meaningful, tangible items to show you the actual pull requests, commits, people, and processes associated with it, so we can have the discussion of what was the blocker, why did this take so much longer than what's typical, what do you need from me as your manager to help improve, so that during the next sprint retro, we've shrunk the long tail and we have more consistent, predictable behavior, not only as a benefit to the team, but as a benefit to the company. Bottom left, before moving on, is advanced KPIs as a submitter of a pull request and then also as a reviewer of a pull request. One thing that always resonates with customers is unreviewed pull requests. We will show you the percentage of PRs that are being merged into master or being moved into production without approval or another set of eyes from the team. This is very low-hanging fruit for process improvement and where most customers begin their success on their flow journey. Our last slide here, before getting into some of the technical detail, is introducing the concept of longer-term trends and the idea of industry benchmarks. What you're looking at here is our code fundamentals. We have a similar set of KPIs for review and submit fundamentals for the pull request. What you see here is active days. This is any day where a team contributes code to the code base, commits per day. This is the frequency in which commits are made, again, following that philosophy of small frequent bites as opposed to saving up your work into one single large commit. Impact, this is a proprietary metric of Git primes. We don't typically cover it on the initial demo call except to say that it measures complexity alongside quantity. One thing to know and always call out, Git prime is not a line of code counting machine. That's a very archaic and unhelpful way of measuring engineers by simply counting lines of code. Many ways impact is designed to reconcile that to actually measure the cognitive load associated with an engineer's work beyond simple raw quantity. And then efficiency, the balance of rewrites. You don't want super high efficiency because that's an indication that that maybe we're sacrificing speed for precision, or maybe we are not reviewing our work as thoroughly as we should, so it's all about finding a balance. The industry benchmarks, we analyzed 90,000 engineers, 7 million plus unique commits to come up with these benchmarks. Through the lens of active days, you can see that 3.3 and here in the middle is primary. The way to think about this is as a full-time software developer, the industry average is to be making commits in the code base on average 3.3 days per week. Leading up there is 4.1. These are the individuals who have organized their flow in a way that enables them to make meaningful contributions nearly every single day of the week. You're able to set targets, and again, we mentioned earlier being able to group by team. You can see the various teams. You can click to drill into a team to see the individuals associated with it. Very early on, with Git prime, you'll be able to get an understanding of where teams are at and then align business expectations. It's okay for teams to be at different benchmarks given their type of the work or their team makeup. But again, that's for the customer and for the manager to decide what that is and then set targets accordingly, regardless of where the team is at beginning with Flow. After 90 days and certainly after 12 months, we would expect a meaningful and measurable improvement to these metrics. The most important takeaway here is that these metrics correlate out to have a positive correlation to productivity by any other measure. So if the customer tracks burn down charts, velocity, story points, feature ship, bug counts, delayed releases, NPS scores, whatever it is, when you optimize these metrics, you're not just optimizing them for the sake of flow, you're doing it because when you do, you will ship more, you will ship faster, you will ship with less bugs, ultimately the things that the business cares about. At the end, that enables you as a sales representative to guarantee a measurable productivity increase when successfully implementing and adopting Git prime across a large organization. Team, that's it. What we move to then quickly is the two scenarios or the two different flavors of Git prime. Scenario A is the cloud or hosted SaaS version of Flow. Sorry, if you hear me say Git prime, that's used interchangeably with Flow throughout the presentation. This is the easiest method. It's typically for smaller teams, sub 250 employees, sub 2,500 employees. Once you get greater than that, most organizations require scenario B. They're more security minded. Unless they're a cloud native company to begin with, they're probably going to need to host Git Prime behind their own firewall, which we call our on-premise or enterprise product, which enables them to host entirely on site without any connectivity to the internet if they prefer. We do like people to do scenario A. You will as well. Speed to value is there. It's very quick. You have 2 clicks of a button, you're up and running. It takes 24 hours to initially ingest your repos, and then you're up and running. That said, scenario A has a no-cost 15-day evaluation associated with it. Scenario B, given the more technical detail, has a 30-day no-cost evaluation period associated with it. We say no cost instead of free, and we also let people know that in exchange for the no cost, we want them to follow some of our parameters around sizing. Let's not throw in 2,000 repos into the environment, and also follow our evaluation meeting cadence and follow-up cadence to ensure evaluation success. One thing that is always important to note is that Git Prime gives you full historical data. If that code repository is 5 years old, you get to go back 5 years in history and view all of that data. Like I just said, when you initially ingest that repo for the first time, give it 24 hours to load because we're giving you that historical data. After that, it updates every three hours, so you're essentially getting real-time data. Again, a major value add for large companies, companies that are spread out geographically, companies that have grown by acquisition and have different pockets of their engineering spread out across many platforms and offices. The most important slide we'll probably cover in the demo. It's always here towards the last, but I'm breaking character for you all here in the room viewing this. This is really, really important. Included in the license fee is the Git Prime Academy. Like I mentioned, my previous history was standing up the post-sales and onboarding and training organization. It's absolutely crucial that people understand that we acknowledge that a lot of this is new. Sometimes this can be really scary. People think that maybe this data is going to be misused or used to fire people, or that stack ranking engineers is a bad thing. All of that's true. So many times we just call that out and say we've seen that, we've learned from our biggest enterprise customers, and what we're able to do is lead you through this initial 6-week onboarding and training plan, and then after that you will be receiving quarterly updates aligned to your business goals. Lastly, ending with the vision of really Pluralsight 2020 here, that skills, Pluralsight skills will give you the ability to apply learning to the areas that Flow have identified require improvement. And then lastly, using this to actually demonstrate the effectiveness of the skills application, or to justify the learning spend. If an organization has invested heavily in skills, many times it's difficult to say, well, are we actually learning, or what has come of that learning? Are we now better? Are we doing more? Git Prime will enable you to figure out where you need to improve. We will layer on skills to provide the necessary tools and learning to improve, and then again use Flow at the end to have that measurable productivity gain to say, yes, it's working, your business investment is being put to good use. That is kind of the life cycle between the products to optimize the effectiveness and enable managers to take charge and have meaningful coaching to ensure successful business outcomes.
Hey, thanks, TJ. Appreciate your time as we've demoed quickly the capabilities of Pluralsight Flow. Wanted to quickly touch on a couple of questions we've got. One of those is, what are some of the things we can expect in terms of, immediate success factors once we implement Flow within, my own organization? I think for that, probably want to use some of the examples. We can kind of talk about more of these as you link up and learn more about Flow, kind of specific to your particular use cases within your organizations. One example, though, I think I like, as TJ mentioned, one of the low-hanging fruit is really around pull requests and code review. A company that we've worked with that builds SaaS software to help run clinical trials focused in on the PR process early in their rollout of Pluralsight Flow. And these metrics tend to go together, but one of the first things they saw was they decreased the average time they had open on pull requests by about 50%. At the same time, active days increased by 26%. And I think and TJ touched on this in terms of what this metric means, but what was cool about this is by doing that, we actually increased our impact by 38% within this organization in a pretty short amount of time, which goes to show by looking at a lot of these metrics together, they tend to start moving in the direction you want them to move once we start focusing on let's start with here, let's go here next. In this case, pull reviews, pull requests is a great way to really get flow started within your organization. Let me walk through a couple more of these. Tell me more about how you segment work. How is this useful in day-to-day work? So you saw a slide a few slides ago in terms of how we segment work in terms of, is this new work? Is this are we refactoring legacy code? Am I helping someone else, or is this code churn? I think the thing to be mindful overall is like to look at this from a team perspective, and that no section of that work is more important than the other. But we like to look for is patterns within that work from over time. And so what you might see is, hey, all of a sudden I have churn increasing over the last week within my team. And I want to dive into that. What might be causing that increased churn, or late into a sprint cycle? I might dive in and understand, hey, we've got a technical issue that's hard to overcome. Things we've tried are not working. More likely to be the case, it's actually not an engineering issue at all. It tends to be more on the business side. I might have changing requirements or initiatives causing my engineers to kind of churn in terms of things they're being asked to do, which you can see by looking at that. To be specific, I think TJ mentioned this, but churn really is the amount of, in terms of code commits, how many of those code commits are, have code that's being worked over within 3 weeks. Once we've hit that 3-week mark, we consider that baked into to your repository, and when we work on that code, it's legacy refactoring, which could be as early as 3 weeks down the road and as late as 3 years, 4 years from now. So that's a great question. I think I have a hand raised. I will see if I understand how to work with that. I do see that. I don't know how to do that on this platform. But if the question bar works, I'm happy to take questions that are written down. Great. One last question I've got. Tell me more about the benchmarks and setting targets. Specifically, can I change those targets? So that's a good question to clarify. TJ talked about how we came up with benchmarks. So benchmarks are built based on all 70,000 engineers we have committing code within the Flow platform. And we've taken that and said, hey, what are the behaviors of an engineer who is going to be a leading contributor? And that really is defined as contributors who are knocking down pull requests, who are getting deliverables done. Based on that, we've set those targets. Here is a recommended amount for active days, commits per day. And then the next thing is, well, how is that specific to my organization? And so one of the things you recognize once you dive into Flow and start a trial, whether that be through the cloud for 2 weeks, or setting something up on-prem, is that you can set those targets, configure them yourself based on the context that you have. Every organization will have that different context, and you actually may have different expectations for different teams. I might be saying, hey, my Q&A team or my QA team isn't going to be held to the same responsibility as a team working on a new feature, actively going through sprint cycles. And so understanding that, we're really giving the power to team managers to really set that target for themselves, which then obviously rolled up to the greater organization metrics that can be reported out to executives or even beyond the engineering function. Oh, a last question that I've got is, how do teams work? I've got engineers on multiple teams. How do you deal with that scenario when I have multiple teams for engineers? And that's pretty easy. We've set it up to accommodate that structure within your organization. We recognize that happens a lot when you have engineers with multiple hats or multiple responsibilities. Really, we consider that one engineer, and we roll that up however you like to look at it. So if you are a team manager and that person resides in your team, you will see his metrics or his or her metrics. If you're a director and you have an engineer on 2 different teams within your group, we will not double count that. You'll just see the roll up from that engineer's contributions over whatever time period you select. All right, that wraps us up for questions. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to learn more from you as you investigate how Flow can impact your organization. We're definitely willing to come in and help. I'd love to talk to your organizations on a one-on-one basis, come in and show the platform. But really, it's all about seeing this particular platform using your own data. That's really where the lights will come on as you apply the context that you have within your organization. You know your organization best, and then seeing that come through on these metrics and KPIs will really help us hone in together on the best use cases specific to your organization. And with that, I will end the webinar and hope to see you guys again. Thank you so much and have a wonderful Friday afternoon.